This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Gold Boys Network. Here's your host, Will Hill.
Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Gold Boys. Coming up on the show, Jonathan Von Tobel of VSiN will join us. We'll talk NFL, college football, big weekend ahead for both. We'll actually check in a little bit with the NBA, get his thoughts on just some big picture thoughts 2.5 weeks in, awards, futures. Haven't done a ton of NBA, and honestly, with football going on, not going to do a lot of it until football clears, but I'm going to check in once in a while. So we will check in with JVT, and again, we'll get his thoughts on the NFL card, the college football card, because exciting games in both leagues coming up as we come down the stretch for both the NFL and college football. And my goodness, what a Thursday night game we had. Probably the game of the year. A lot of points, a 35-34 Ravens victory. Bengals go for 2. They lose. This game had everything. A lot of offense, a lot of points, a lot of big swings, back and forth momentum. Cincinnati led 21-7. Baltimore came back, looked like they were in control. Controversial coaching decisions. A lot of, if you're watching the game at home or with your buddies, you're sitting there playing coach and just saying, hey, they're scoring too early, or they got to run the clock, or this team should go for it, or they shouldn't go for it. There's just a lot of moving parts of this game, and it made it a lot of fun. Chase was incredible. Burrow was great. Lamar was good when he needed to be. It looked like he threw a key interception with about 5.5 minutes to go, but the ball hit the ground. Baltimore gets the ball back, and just a lot of games, a lot of plays that could have gone either way. Since he got a critical 4th down catch on the final drive where they did score a touchdown, where it looked like maybe he's short, but no, once you look at it, he got the first down, and maybe the ball hit the ground, which it did kind of turn over in that last drive, but they gave it to him. They missed some calls against the Bengals, especially on that 2-point conversion. Looked like Burrow got hit in the face. Looked like Cincy could have gotten called against a hold on Baltimore. Just, man, a great game, back and forth. And boy, if you're Cincy, you probably feel like you should have swept Baltimore. You were up 10 at home in the game 5 weeks ago in the fourth quarter. You lost that game in overtime in just horrific fashion. And in this game, you were up 14 and you had plenty of chances to put the game away, and you lost this game. So Cincy's chances of winning the division are pretty much done. They are 3 games behind Baltimore, plus they don't have the tiebreaker because Baltimore swept them. So they're essentially 4 games out with, less than half the season to play. They're not winning the division, barring something horrific happening to, Lamar, some season-ending injury or something like that happening soon. And even that, I don't know if that would be enough. So since he's not winning division, I know that was a sharp play coming into the season because of the schedule disparity. Since he had an easy schedule, Baltimore and these other teams had a tough schedule. So that's probably not going to happen since he's not winning division. If anything, maybe they can get a wild card. At 4-6 here, they're going to have some digging to do. Can't rule them out. They're still a good team. That's still better than 70-80% of the teams in the league. But look, when you put yourself in a hole and you lose to the Patriots and you lose these home games early, and look, that loss to Washington on Monday night doesn't look as bad now, but that loss to New England is one that's just going to linger with you. Or, man, how did you lose to that team at home? I know it's week 1. I know none of these teams practice in the preseason, but that is hanging over Cincy. And again, you let these games against Baltimore get away. The odds for the NFC North are not up right now at DraftKings, but I will say anything even money, slightly less than even money. I know Baltimore's like plus 190 coming into the day to win the division. Boy, and that's a steal. Anything plus money, or even like minus 120, minus 130 is a good bet, because if you look at this Pittsburgh schedule coming up, Pittsburgh and Baltimore actually play next week. And then Pittsburgh, they have a game this week against Washington where they're an underdog. They got a game at Philly. They play the Chiefs. They play the Ravens again. They got a couple games against the Browns. I know the Browns aren't any good, but are those games going to be easy? Man, I think Baltimore is going to run away and win this division. And look, maybe the Bills butt their nose in and break this up. But it does seem like, doesn't it? It does seem like we're headed for a rematch of last year's AFC title game. Chiefs, Ravens, a rematch of opening night. The Chiefs and the Ravens are pretty clearly the 2 best teams in the AFC. I know the Bills have Allen, and who knows, maybe the bracket breaks a certain way where that game's not the title game, but it looks like the Chiefs will either be the one. The Chiefs are going to be probably the 1. Baltimore is probably going to be the 2, and then you're probably looking at a Buffalo 2-3 game. I would think, unless Buffalo somehow falls to the 4 and Houston moves up to 3. Again, we're a long way from that, but it does feel like a Kansas City, Baltimore AFC title game, barring something unforeseen. And Allen, masterclass game against one of these teams is going to would be the only thing to prevent a rematch of the AFC title game. Because my goodness, the three best teams pretty clearly right now are Detroit, and then they're in the NFC, and then Baltimore, then Kansas City, and then there is a gap between everybody else. So should be a lot of fun. I think Pittsburgh's schedule. And look, I was wrong about Pittsburgh. I thought they'd be an under team. So if you're a Pittsburgh fan, you don't really care what I have to say about Pittsburgh, but it does feel like Baltimore is going to separate and pull away in the AFC North. Chiefs are going to win the West. Texans are going to win the South. Bills are going to win the East. And when the dust is settled, late January, we are probably going to be looking at, and KC beat Baltimore head to head, remember, on opening night. So that game is probably going to be in Kansas City, a rematch of Baltimore and Kansas City. Baltimore's got their issues defensively, but my goodness, with Henry, with their weapons, with Lamar's versatility, that is a team. And Tucker's not as good anymore, so maybe that bites him. Who knows? But a Kansas City Baltimore rematch is certainly in the cards here going forward. And if you don't have a dog in the fight, I don't know how you could argue against watching that game again, because those two teams are pretty damn good. And I would say above everybody else, but since he plays Baltimore to the death every time, and Buffalo does have Allen, so we'll see what happens. But we could certainly be looking at a rematch of last year's AFC title game, and who knows, maybe a rematch of NFC's title game last year if San Francisco can get their stuff together. So great game, really, really the best game of the year. Coaching decisions, referee stuff, points, swings. I mean, that was as good as it gets. Unless you're a Bengal fan, that was as good as it gets in terms of a football game Thursday night. Just an incredible game. And usually, these Thursday games are, I don't know, the Saints and the Titans, or NFC South games or AFC South games, and kind of last week Jets Texans was kind of a muddled mess with a sloppy offense. This was a crisp game. Both teams moved the ball. Both teams scored a lot of points. It was just a fun game. And next week we got Commanders and Eagles, which is another really good game and an important game. So we're on a run here of Thursday night games that are going to be a lot of fun. Quickly before we get to JVT, my picks for the weekend. I'm going to go with San Francisco -6.5. They are playing Tampa Bay. San Francisco's off a bye. They're rested. They're getting McCaffrey back. Tampa just played on Monday night. They're on a short week. They were on the road, and they played 83 plays of defense against Kansas City. And I just don't know that they have the recipe to slow down the 49ers. And I think San Francisco, we've seen them struggle the first half of these seasons. And there was a game last year against Jacksonville where same sort of scenario where they're struggling. What's going to be the rest of their season? And they went in and they destroyed Jacksonville. I could see a similar scenario here where they beat Tampa by 10, 14, 17 plus points. I like San Francisco 6.5. I'll call it 6.5 just to not give myself the best of the number here. I think San Francisco is good to lay here. Now, remember, these home dogs have not done well. These favorites just straight up have done really well. And the NFL, that has a way of correcting itself. So be careful laying the points or throwing these money line favorites together in your parlays. So keep that in mind. But with that being said, I will lay it with San Francisco. The other game I like the Saints +3.5. I just think, look, they're playing the Falcons. This game is in New Orleans. The first time these teams met early in the season, the Falcons were laying 2.5, and this game was in Atlanta, and they only won by 2. They didn't cover. The Saints outgained them. And in that game, the Falcons scored a special teams touchdown on a punt return that was fumbled in the end zone. Falcons recovered, and the Falcons returned a pick six for a touchdown. So the Falcons got 2 non-offensive touchdowns and still didn't win the game by enough margin to cover the spread. So Saints fired the coach. It's a division game. Atlanta, look, they probably got the division wrapped up here. I could see 24-21 type of game. I 23-20, something like that. I think it's a field goal game. I wouldn't be shocked if the Saints won. I think these teams usually get a bump when they fire the coach. So 49ers -6.5, Saints +3.5 are the ones I like in the NFL. And just quickly before we get to JVT in college, I do like the under Georgia Ole Miss, right around 54.5. Maybe if you shop around, you can get a 55. I like the under. Ole Miss is all beat up at their skill position. Harris is hurt. The running back is hurt. In Georgia, the quarterback, Beck, has turned the ball over a ton of times. I'm sure Kirby Smart says, look, I don't want to lose this game with my quarterback. I know what happened when we went into Alabama. We lost this game because of turnovers. I don't want that to happen again. So maybe Georgia has a conservative game plan. Ole Miss has plenty of elite defenders, defensive, in the front seven defensively. Maybe that's a game where it's, again, it's like, 27-24 still gets you under. Maybe it's that type of game. I want to pick Ole Miss just because, man, you're getting points at home. I don't know if this is a vintage Georgia team. It's not. That being said, do I want to take Lane Kiffin against Kirby Smart in a big game? I don't have the appetite to do that. It'll be a fun game to watch. I don't know that it's a game to bet. If you can get the 3, I get taking the points. There were 3.5s. That was certainly a play. We had Kev O'Neill on Sunday saying, hey, you got to take the 3.5. 3.5 is the wrong number. I understand that. Now we're at basically 2.5 consensus. That's probably about the right line. If you like Georgia, just take the money line. If you like Ole Miss, maybe you find a 3 like -120. I got a feeling Ole Miss beats them. I just do. I just can't get there with Kiffin. So I will play the under, but should be a fun game. Georgia Ole Miss is a great game. Bama LSU is another great game. So Colorado Texas Tech, man, a lot of these games have playoff implications. And I was not a big fan of expanding to 12 games, but man, 12 teams in the playoffs. But man, once we get here, a lot of these games that would no longer have implications, they have a lot of meaning, a lot of importance heading into this weekend. So excited to watch these games, excited to discuss these games. We will discuss all of this with Jonathan Von Tobel. That is next. This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More podcast. You can catch him on VSiN Primetime, senior NBA analyst. He hasn't been on, I don't think, since the summer. It is Jonathan Von Tobel. He's back. JVT, what's up, man? I'm trying to think. Maybe right before the Olympics was the last time you had it on. Like a little, we did a little summer league. I know we did a lot during the finals, but good to have you back. What's going on?
Yeah, I think so. We were talking NBA. I think we talked a little NBA futures too at some point, but nothing, man. Like this is my favorite time of year. You know, I'm a big Christmas guy. I like all the winter sports. It's a busy time of year. College hoops is underway. I'm a basketball head, so college and pro I'm in. So yeah, dude, I'm stoked. This is the best time.
We will get to NFL and college, but I have not done a lot of NBA on this podcast. Did a little mini show on before the season started a couple of weeks ago, but I will just ask it this way: 2 weeks in, what is sort of your biggest takeaway? Biggest surprise, biggest disappointment? Take it whatever direction you want.
So I think and whenever I'm asked this question, I keep going back to, and it's hard not to if you've been paying attention, to Cleveland. Cleveland's freaking awesome, and they're a team that I was high on coming into the year. They've played 9 games. I bet on 7 of them. Like they're a tremendous team, and they have the Westgate Superbook out here has a win total contest. So use them on the over. Like I think they're going to be a tremendous regular season team, and they could push Boston for most wins in the Eastern Conference. And I think that's where you start. Kenny Atkinson has this team playing such a different brand of basketball than what we're used to. They're shooting more threes. Their pace is up. Guys like Darius Garland look a lot more comfortable. They're currently right now 12th in the NBA in pace. And one of the big things that I think Atkinson has done is he has convinced Evan Mobley, we need you to space the floor because we cannot play you and Jarrett Allen together if you're not going to shoot. And so Evan Mobley has done that. He's shooting around 40% from 3. It's not like on a high volume, but you just need to have that deadly threat along the perimeter to make other defenses respect you. And it's just opened up the floor for Garland and Mitchell. And Will, I think the best part about what we've seen from them is through these 9 games, they are 8-1 against the spread. They are undefeated, and they're doing this without Max Strus. Remember, Max Strus has been injured this whole time too. So once you add his shooting and spacing to what they're going to do here, I think this team's a legitimate threat to win the top seed in the Eastern Conference. And given the way the Eastern Conference looks right now, I don't think there's any question. They are the second best team in the East.
Any futures awards jumping in on at the moment?
Okay, so I think there's a couple, and I will go to the most subjective award possible, but I feel like I've got a read on it this year.
Hold on,
so
let me guess. Let me guess. Most improved?
Yes, most improved. Now, I think this market's fascinating for just the reason that I just mentioned, right? Like it's super subjective. You have no idea what's going to happen. You don't know how voters view improvement. But I will say this. I do think that, and the market's kind of responded here a little bit and evening things out. But for a while, there were a couple of guys that this market was mispriced. They had a bunch of second-year dudes that were inside of like the top 4 in terms of odds. Second-year guys for your audience, they cannot win this award. It's not that it's a written rule. It's an unwritten rule. You have writers who refuse to vote for second-year guys because the expectation is that they will improve. So, for example, one of the big names that's being thrown out there for most improved is Grady Dick. Grady Dick's off to a tremendous start. He's absolutely incredible. But Brian Windhorst and Tim Bontemps on their podcast just last week talked about Victor Wembanyama's status as favored to win most improved, both staunchly against voting for him just because he's a second-year player. The other guy that we should note here, too, while he is technically in his 3rd year, he is in his 2nd year as a player. That would be Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren, I would say you can also draw a line through to win this award. So one of the guys that had a near triple-double last night that I've got him at 14-1. I still thinking about 7-1. He's playable. He is your new favorite right now. But Jalen Johnson for the Atlanta Hawks is off to an awesome start, and they absolutely need him. They are very thin. They are getting beat up in terms of injuries. They've got about 5 or 6 guys that have been missing time for them that figure to be a regular part of their rotation. Johnson's a fourth-year dude. He's really improved his three-point shooting. His efficiency is up. Again, he is a triple-double threat on almost every single given night. I would very much look to back Jalen Johnson. Still, again, he is a favorite. He is at 7-1, but I think he's going to start to pull away because in these awards, Will, and I think you know this too, more often than not, the favorite gets established pretty early in the season. It's actually hard more often than not than you would think for a guy to get unseated once he is given the status of favorite. We can go back in many different awards and do this. So I think out of all of these awards, Jalen Johnson is one that I would still back at 7-1.
Interesting. I'm going to add that now. I think 7-1. I'm going to do that. NFL. What do you like this week? Sides, totals, take it whatever direction.
Yeah, so there's a couple. I'll go with. Look, you know me. I'm a Colts fan, and I am very. I don't want to say anti. I do think people are putting a lot of stock on 5 games for the Cleveland Browns for Joe Flacco. I think if you look at the larger sample size going back to the New York Jets and you pick away every single one of those, he's not a great quarterback. There was a reason why he was available on the couch for the Cleveland Browns and why he was the story that he was. I think the Colts are on the verge of potentially getting curb stomped here by Buffalo. Now, the market's just sitting solidly at 4. They 3.5 popped up the other day, but it disappeared pretty quickly. I'm going to hold out to see if I can get that 3.5 again, but Buffalo is going to be a side for me. I think the Colts secondary has some issues. I think Josh Allen's going to be able to do what he wants against this defense. And on the flip side, I think what we've seen from Joe Flacco in every appearance this year, every appearance so far this season, outside of the one against Jacksonville, which, by the way, they only had 10 points going into that fourth quarter against the worst defense in the NFL, he's done absolutely nothing. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, I'm really kind of bullish on fading Indy now that Flacco's there because the market has upgraded them, and I don't think they deserve it. And I think if you go back to Indy and what they've been doing prior to the Vikings start, remember, they were 7-1 ATS, but they were only covering by 1.5 points per game. Market has upgraded them with Flacco, an upgrade I don't think that they deserve. And now I think you're going to start to see them fail to cover some numbers. So I think the Bills -4 in that spot against Indianapolis. I also think when you look at the board too, with San Francisco, I think I'm willing to swallow those 6 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, especially if we're going to start to get healthy here for the 49ers. I understand what's going on. I think that Cade Otton's been a great story, and this wide receiver core has been pretty beat up for Tampa Bay. You did it, looked pretty competent in the last couple of weeks, especially against Kansas City, but it's a terrible rest situation for Tampa Bay against San Francisco, who's got a little bit of an advantage there. And I think with them getting healthier on both sides, it's going to be an opportunity to back a 49ers team that I think is kind of in a buy low spot. You know what I mean? Like, these last couple of weeks, I thought they were in a buy low situation against Dallas. They got there, and I think this is another situation for them to get in.
I had Bear on the other day, Chris Felica. He suggested maybe 49ers 12-1 to win it all, plus 450, plus 500 to win the conference. Would you go down that route?
Absolutely. Because look, I mean, when we watch this team, right, you look at some of the teams that have been somewhat disappointing up to this point of the year. The reason why the 49ers aren't meeting our expectations is largely due to injury, right? It's not due to the fact that Brock Purdy has regressed in an otherworldly fashion or that Christian McCaffrey is just not performing up to snuff.
Some fluky
this is a team
losses too, where they lose the kicker, then they're up, late against the Rams. Yeah, it's been fluky.
Yep. So those are the teams that I want to buy on, right? Not teams that I'm like, they're going to turn it around. No, I want to buy on the teams that there's a clear reason for why you're underperforming. And I think there's a pretty clear reason why that's happening for San Francisco.
College football, before we get to some of the games that you like, what is like the biggest, put yourself in like the committee shoes. What do you think is going to be like the biggest conundrum debate as we fast forward to like the last week or two when we're coming down to pick these 12 teams? Is it, I know I asked Bear that question this the other day, and he said maybe like a 10-3 Bama would be interesting. I think maybe if SMU lost a close ACC title game and only had 2 losses, that could be interesting. What are some that you're thinking of as far as these conundrums for the committee?
So I don't think this will come to fruition this year. Maybe it will. We'll see. We have plenty of football left. But what I find pretty fascinating is when you look at the buys, right? And the fourth buy is obviously probably going to be the Big 12 team, maybe the Group of 5 rep if Boise State wins out and whoever wins the Big 12 falls away. But what I think is going to be interesting is the conversation that stems from that once we get our final bracket. Because if you get either a group of 5 team or like a 2-loss or maybe even a 3-loss, God forbid, Big 12 champion that's sitting in that bye, there's going to be a lot of conversations about the system in general, right? When like 1-loss Ohio State is sitting on the outside of the bye weeks and you're looking at a 4 seed and everybody's going, well, what the hell is this? Like, why is this team deserving of a bye, even though you have a 1-loss Ohio State team that's clearly better having to go play somebody else as like a 5 seed or whatever it is? So I'm going to be very curious to see if that's maybe not a conundrum, because again, I don't think that's going to happen this year, but I think bigger picture, what happens with that 4th seed is going to drum up some of the stupid conversations we have about the format of the playoff.
Well, and boy, I have a lot of digging in to do with like these conference tiebreakers, the bracket. I don't know if do they reseed the bracket? Do you play the highest seed or the bracket? It's like March Madness where it's set. I don't even know.
I believe it's the bracket. So like,
okay.
The bracket's set up. That's why, a lot of people were like Ohio State, even though they didn't get the bye, the first projected bracket, they'd sign up for that in a heartbeat, because I think it was like Ohio State, Boise State. Then they would go to take on BYU in the next round, right? Like they had a really clear path to the semifinal. I don't think you reseed. I think you go straight through the bracket the way it's set.
Because Ohio State would if they're at 1 loss, that means they win out and they win the Big Ten. That would give them a bye, no?
Well, I'm assuming you're right. Not 1 loss. Sorry, 2-loss Ohio State. I misspoke there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like a 2-loss Ohio State with both losses coming on a single possession to Oregon, right? Like that would be something where I think a lot of people would look at that and go like, what are we doing here? Now, again, this one might not come to fruition this year, but I do think that's one of the things. And I think the other one is what's going to be fascinating is Indiana, right? Like Indiana down the stretch here. Obviously, a lot of people expect them to lose to Ohio State, but you have the opportunity to get a win over Michigan and potentially finish as a 1-loss team. But that schedule's really weak. And if you lose the lone test on your schedule and by a wide margin, what do you do with a team like Indiana?
I think they would put them in 1 loss at Ohio State. I think that's forgivable. They've killed everybody.
But what if they get smoked?
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean? Like if that's a lopsided loss to Ohio State.
I don't think they're going to, by the way.
It's in the realm of
possibility. To win the game. I think they're pretty good. I think
so too, but I think it's also within the realm of possibility that we look up that Saturday and they're getting dog walked and it's their only loss of the season. And you're like, okay, like, I don't know what we're doing here.
And then, their last game is against Purdue. It's not like you're going to get any, strength of victory points there. It's interesting. It is interesting. Bama, LSU, Bama laying a field goal. Is Bama done with a loss? Is this a loser leaves town game?
I mean, okay. I never want to say with the SEC teams, especially like Bama, that it's like 100%, but it would seem on the surface that a third loss would knock you out here. So this is, I think, it. Like if you lose this game, you should be done. You should not be in contention for the college football playoff.
Who do you like in the game?
Yeah, I kind of lean toward taking the field goal here. Like I didn't have anything strong. I've actually got a couple of SEC games that I liked here for the most part, but you look at where the market was a couple of weeks ago, like a week ago on the look ahead and where we're at now. I don't think it really deemed pushing that up to the full field goal at this point. That's like pretty readily available across the board. I think LSU's got some opportunities to come in here, have some success against the secondary that's had some issues in coverage, and I think go after this team. And of course, we know, right? It's a night game out there in LSU. We know what those environments are like. Tough road spot. We've seen Alabama at times kind of wilt. They don't really like what they've done defensively at times, especially up front. Weird spots when it comes to their play against the run. We can go back to that Vandy game, of course, as a prime example there. But I do think LSU's here pretty live. I don't think I deemed anything that was worth putting this on a full field goal. And in some faraway spots, we're starting to get off of that 3. And I'd venture a guess by the time we get to kickoff, you're going to see some like 2.5s juiced, some 3 juiced. I don't think you're going to see that 3 minus 110 out there.
How about the other big one, Georgia Ole Miss, mostly 2.5. Where do you think this closes and who do you like?
Yep. So I just wrote this up for the website of VSiN.com. I laid 2.5 with Georgia. So I would assume that, again, probably similar, right? Like, I don't think you're going to get like that full 3. You're probably going to get like some juice 2.5s or 3s. By the time we get to kickoff, we're starting to see some 3s pop up. But look, one of the things that I kind of harped on in the write-up for this, and maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but if you look at Carson Beck, I know a lot of people are really freaking out about the interceptions, right? He's thrown 6 interceptions over his last 2 games. Everybody can't figure it out. We're having conversations about him as the best quarterback in this upcoming draft class. But if you really break down what he's done up to this year, Will, he has committed, if you go, of his turnover-worthy plays, he's committed 14. 10 of them have come in 2 games. It's really been 2 big blow-ups where he's putting the ball in danger that have really killed him. If you go back to some of these games, he's actually not really getting charged for some of these turnovers, right? He's getting hit while he's thrown, little things like that, where if you look at the intricacies of throwing interceptable passes, some of them are not really on him. And if you break it down before his last 2 starts, which were pretty awful, he's actually the 18th best passer in the country before his last 2 games. And he only had a turnover-worthy play rate of about 2%. I think that when you look at his ability to take care of the football, I don't want to harp too much on 2 lesser games. I want to look at him bigger picture, even dating back to last year. And I do think that's something that works for them. On the other side, Trey Harris looks like he's not going to come back this week for Ole Miss. That's a blow for them. Georgia, 7th in opponent EPA per rush, 15th in EPA per dropback, one of the best defenses in the country in limiting explosive plays. And really quietly, one of the things that Ole Miss has struggled with this year, they're only 46th in the country in success rate on late downs, so like 3rd or 4th downs. It's one of the best defenses in the country on late downs in 3rd or 4th downs for Georgia. So I'm going to buy low, and I'm also, take it with a grain of salt, I'm pretty anti-Ole Miss. I questioned them many times last year. We remember when they went to Athens, got absolutely mollywopped by Georgia. I questioned whether or not they were this legit team that everybody thought. And then you go and you see against 2 lesser defenses, they average just over 5 yards per play against both Kentucky and LSU. I think that this is one where you're going to buy low, get under 3 with Georgia.
Yeah, I have a hard time taking Kiffin over Kirby Smart. It does concern me with Beck. I don't feel like this is like a vintage Georgia team with the skill guys. I think I like the under more than anything, just because, like you said, Ole Miss is beat up on offense. I feel like Kirby Smart, with all the turnovers recently, probably doesn't want another repeat of Bama. So maybe he comes in a little conservative. Maybe you see like a 27-24 type of game. So I think I lean towards the under here.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
What anything else you like, SEC or in general?
Yeah, so I'm actually really interested in this spot with Florida and Texas. So Florida's trying to, I don't know if you're seeing this, they're trying to put it out there that DJ Lagway is going to play in this game. He was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday. I don't believe that he's going to play. I mean, the kid was carted off and it's a hamstring injury. You're 4-4. I don't think you're going to risk his future because he looks like he's got some pretty bright upside.
Yeah.
To potentially go out here as 3 touchdown underdogs against Texas. So I laid 21.5 with Texas. Circa opened this 24 on Sunday. It's back down to 21.5. I would expect that once we get the official news that Lagway's not going to play, we're going to get this back up. But it's not just him either. Remember, Florida's got about 5 other starters that are considered questionable. They lost cornerback Devin Moore in the loss to Georgia as well. He's already been ruled out. They've already been decimated by injuries with many different things. And one of the quiet things about the walk-on kid, Aiden Warner, who came in for DJ Lagway, if he's going to start this week, which again I think he is, this is the most troublesome stat from that appearance against Georgia. According to PFF, he was kept clean on 21 of his 27 dropbacks. So the kid wasn't even pressured. And he was awful. Like, he could not do anything against Georgia's defense. 7 of 24, 66 yards, 2.8 yards per attempt. And that's when you're kept clean on a vast majority of your dropbacks. Florida's offensive line actually done a pretty good job. So if this kid can't even handle like defenses when he's being given the opportunity to go through his progressions, being kept clean, being kept up, what's going to happen when a Texas front that can get after you is going to be able to pressure you? I think that this gets pretty ugly. So I laid 21.5 with Texas.
About a Florida team total under 10.5.
Yeah, so I was looking for one of those too. So I think so. But you remember, you and I were on the air for that game, right? Watching it.
Yeah.
And they scored it late in the 4th quarter, like the meaningless touchdown, like that can always pop up and kill you, especially if it's as lopsided as I think it's going to be.
Sure. And the defense offense, and you get a little garbage time. But
yep.
I don't know. I might be willing to take the bet, to make that bet, and just and live with the risk. All right, man.
Sure.
Anything else college otherwise?
No, I think there was a couple of, so I actually got priced out pretty quickly. I want to see if the market buys it back. But my UNLV Rebels on the road against Hawaii. This thing's down to 12.5, by the way, at Circa, as we're talking about this now in multiple other spots. I actually wouldn't say no to taking 13.5 with Hawaii. Look, I think UNLV and Barry Odom, look, he is one of the best cover coaches in the country since he's taken over the program. He's always got this team ready to go. He always has them prepared. And this is, I like numbers. I like statistics. This is purely on vibes. I've watched a lot of UNLV football in my years. Those trips to Hawaii get wonky. It's a long trip. You go all the way out there. It is a low-key rivalry spot. They play for the Golden Pineapple Trophy or whatever they do. It is one in which Hawaii gets really amped up for, and you are going to get, I think, the kitchen sink from Hawaii in this spot. But what I got priced out was the under. This thing opened at Circa, I think we opened at 54.5. Yeah, but that thing got snapped up quick. Like within 2 minutes, it was down to 50. But I wanted to bet this thing under. If the buyback comes and I get back up to like 51.5, it's going to be my buy price. I'll go under again. But I think that UNLV is in a tough spot to cover by 2 touchdowns on the road against Hawaii.
Last one. If these teams all win out, who wins the Heisman? So Colorado wins out with Hunter. Ward in Miami went out. Gabriel in Oregon went out. And I'll throw Genty in there, although I don't think Genty's going to win.
Well, okay, so I would think if they went out, and I would assume like, not like normal statistical production
Right.
of what they're doing at this point right now, I find it hard to not to pick Ward there
I
to
agree.
win the award. Like the guy's throwing like 5 touchdowns in a game, and he's getting in these shootouts because his defense isn't particularly good. And if they're going to win out, he's going to put up some pretty gaudy numbers. And I think that would give him the award over like a Dylan Gabriel, whose numbers aren't going to be as flashy, especially from a touchdown passes standpoint, but whose resume is going to be better.
Yeah, could there be a scenario where Colorado wins out and Hunter has one of these games where he's got 2 touchdowns on offense
Sure.
and like an interception or a pick six and people just blown away by the versatility? I don't know. I think it's probably Ward.
I think so too. I think that's obviously a threat. And like, given what we're just talking about back and forth here, I kind of feel like Genty's performance against UNLV was probably the
was always
pencil
going to
drawn
be
through him.
tough. It was always was always just, it was going to be such a high bar to live up to every game after game. It's just winning at that position at that school is just always an uphill climb.
Yep. Think about that. He ran for 128 yards. We were like, yeah, draw the line through him. But he only averaged 3.8 yards per carry. And like, that's part of the problem. He was not efficient.
And game-winning touchdown, right, in that game?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
I was there, but there was also a lot of tequila, so I can't really remember.
Yeah, 130 yards, game-winning touchdown. Cross him off. He's, He can't win. It's crazy. JVT, appreciate the time, man. This was fun. Hopefully we'll do it again soon. Let everyone know where they can find you.
You can follow me on Twitter at MeJVT. VSiN Primetime, Monday through Friday, 4 to 8. I'm not on Monday through Friday, but I'm on 4 of the 5 days, so make sure you check it out.
All right, good to catch up. Thanks again, man.
Thanks, man.
All right, thank you to Jonathan Von Tobel. Rate, review, subscribe. Enjoy what should be a great sports weekend. We'll see you Monday. Talk to you then.